Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing a moment that has ignited fierce debate across professional basketball and exposed fractures in the foundation of competitive integrity. Angel Reese, the Defensive Player of the Year from last season, made her highly anticipated return to the hardwood last night with the Rose Basketball Club, and what unfolded in the final seconds has sent shockwaves through the league and beyond. In a game-deciding possession with everything on the line, Reese found herself isolated one-on-one against Kelsey Mitchell, and the outcome was nothing short of devastating. Mitchell cooked the Defensive Player of the Year, scoring the game-winning basket with such ease that questions are now exploding about the legitimacy of Reese's return, the competitive integrity of this league, and whether powerful media forces orchestrated this comeback for ratings rather than basketball merit. This is not just about one possession or one game. This is about the soul of professional basketball and whether what we are watching is authentic competition or manufactured entertainment. This was supposed to be the triumphant return, the moment when one of the league's most polarizing figures stepped back onto the court after an absence that left fans and critics alike questioning when or if she would return at all. Angel Reese, who earned Defensive Player of the Year honors through a combination of rebounding prowess and defensive intensity, was checking back into professional basketball, and the narrative was already written before tip-off even occurred. The comeback story, the redemption arc, the ratings boost that a struggling league desperately needed as viewership numbers have plummeted to levels so catastrophic that recent broadcasts haven't even registered on standard ratings measurements. The stage was set for a feel-good moment that would generate headlines and social media engagement, regardless of the actual basketball quality delivered. 13 points and 9 rebounds in just 11 minutes of action. On paper, those numbers look solid, even impressive given the limited court time. 6 of 9 from the field suggests efficiency and scoring touch, the kind of performance that makes casual observers think everything is fine, that the rust has been shaken off completely, that the player who dominated stretches of last season had returned without missing a beat and was ready to contribute meaningful minutes down the stretch. But numbers on a stat sheet only tell a fraction of the story, and what the cameras captured last night reveals a far more complex and troubling reality about where this player actually stands and what her return truly means for competitive basketball at the professional level. Throughout the game, there were flashes, moments where Angel Reese looked like the player who earned accolades last season and became one of the most discussed athletes in women's basketball. Offensive rebounds that showcased her relentless motor and positioning instincts. A couple of baskets that reminded everyone why she became a household name and why her presence generates attention regardless of context. Reports had circulated that she had been in the gym working extensively with Chelsea Gray, her former Rose teammate and one of the most skilled point guards in the game, refining the weaknesses that had been exposed and preparing for this exact moment. The hope was that time away from competition had been spent not just healing physically, but evolving as a player, transforming vulnerabilities into strengths, and returning as a more complete and polished athlete, capable of contributing at both ends of the floor. But then there were the other moments, the angel moments, as those who have followed her career closely have come to recognize and anticipate them. The missed layups that defy explanation for a professional athlete competing at this level with this much training and resources. The offensive possessions that looked awkward and forced, lacking the fluidity and rhythm that separates professional execution from recreational play. The defensive sequences that raised eyebrows given her Defensive Player of the Year status and the expectations that come with that prestigious honor. One sequence in particular drew immediate attention and social media commentary when she appeared to travel on a drive to the basket, though opinions remained sharply divided on whether the officials missed an obvious call or whether it was legitimate footwork that only looked awkward due to her unique playing style. These moments accumulated throughout the game, building a counter-narrative that conflicted sharply with the triumphant return storyline that had been carefully constructed by league marketing and media partners. And then came the final possession. The moment that will define this return far more than any stat line or highlight reel ever could. Rose Basketball Club down by a single point with seconds remaining. The ball in play, the defense scrambling to get organized, and there, isolated on the perimeter in the most crucial moment of the game, stood Angel Reese, the Defensive Player of the Year, matched up one-on-one against Kelsey Mitchell. If you wanted to script a moment for Reese to prove her value, to demonstrate why her return mattered beyond social media metrics, to show that the defensive prowess that earned her the league's highest defensive honor remained intact and sharp, this was it. One stop, one defensive stand, force a miss, secure the rebound, and the Rose would have possession with a chance to win the game and validate this entire comeback narrative. Kelsey Mitchell, who had already torched the Rose defense for 27 points in just 19 minutes of action, a scoring eruption that showcased why she remains one of the most lethal and underappreciated offensive weapons in professional basketball, took the ball at the top of the key. The Defensive Player of the Year set her stance, feet positioned, hands active. The crowd, what little of it existed in an arena that struggles to fill even a fraction of its seats on most nights, anticipated the crucial stop that would flip the game's outcome and create the dramatic finish that everyone hoped for. Mitchell attacked off the dribble, and what happened next was not competitive basketball. It was not a hard-fought battle between elite athletes where the offense barely edged out the defense. It was complete and utter domination that left no room for interpretation or debate. Mitchell blew past Reese as if the Defensive Player of the Year was a traffic cone placed on the court for a shooting drill, an inanimate object offering zero resistance. There was no meaningful contest, no defensive adjustment that even slightly troubled the offensive player. No recovery attempt that made Mitchell work for the finish. Mitchell glided to the basket and finished a layup with such ease and comfort that replays from multiple angles only amplified and underscored how thoroughly and completely Reese had been beaten. The game-winning basket, the dagger that ended the Rose's hopes and sealed their fate. And it came directly through the player who was supposed to be their defensive anchor. The athlete whose defensive abilities had been celebrated league-wide and recognized with the sport's most prestigious defensive honor just months earlier. The reaction was immediate and telling. Mitchell, after scoring the game winner, turned and delivered a look. Not a verbal taunt that could draw a technical foul. Not an excessive celebration that could be deemed unsportsmanlike. Just a look that communicated everything that needed to be said without a single word being spoken. A look that basketball fans across every level of the sport recognized instantly as the nonverbal expression of complete dominance. A look that said the matchup was never close, that the outcome was never in doubt, that the gap between offensive excellence and defensive reputation had been exposed on the biggest stage possible for all to see. Reese, visibly frustrated as the final buzzer sounded and the defeat became official, bounced the ball hard off the court in a moment of raw emotion that captured the devastation of the loss and perhaps the deeper realization of how the final sequence would be remembered, dissected, and replayed endlessly across social media platforms. But the on-court result, as significant and dramatic as it was in the moment, represents only the surface of a far deeper controversy now consuming league discussions and threatening to overshadow everything else. Because Angel Reese's return raises questions that extend well beyond basketball performance or individual player evaluation. Questions about competitive integrity and whether it still exists in this league. Questions about preferential treatment and whether certain players operate under different rules than others. Questions about whether media partnerships and television contracts are now dictating personnel decisions and roster moves in ways that fundamentally compromise the sport itself and transform it from competition into content creation. Candace Parker, one of the most respected voices in basketball analysis, with a championship pedigree and years of experience navigating professional sports, immediately identified what she called shadiness surrounding the entire situation. Her questioning was direct and pointed, not couched in diplomatic language or hesitant speculation. Why is Angel Reese suddenly back in the league when there are players riding benches across multiple teams waiting for opportunities they have earned through preparation and availability? What exemption was created to facilitate this return? Were proper protocols followed, or were rules bent or broken to accommodate someone whose celebrity and social media following exceeds their current competitive contribution? These are not casual questions from a casual observer looking to generate controversy. These are serious allegations from someone who understands intimately how professional leagues operate and how decisions are supposed to be made when integrity matters more than headlines. The timing of the return compounds the suspicion and makes the basketball justification nearly impossible to construct. The Rose Basketball Club has precisely 2 games remaining in their season. 2 games. The playoffs are mathematically nearly impossible to reach, barring a series of unlikely outcomes. The practical basketball justification for activating a player who has been away from competition for an extended period, who needs time to regain rhythm and conditioning, who requires integration into offensive and defensive systems and rotations, makes virtually no sense when the season is effectively over and playoff positioning is no longer achievable. Unless, of course, the decision has nothing whatsoever to do with basketball and everything to do with something else entirely. That something else appears to be ratings and the desperate attempt to generate viewership in a league hemorrhaging audience attention. Television viewership for this league has collapsed to historically unprecedented lows that threaten the viability of media partnerships. Recent broadcasts have failed to register on standard viewership measurements, meaning the audience is so microscopically small that it falls below the threshold required to even appear in ratings data that advertisers and sponsors use to evaluate their investments. For a professional league with television contracts worth millions of dollars, with sponsors whose continued participation depends on reaching audiences, with media partnerships that require delivering eyeballs and engagement metrics, this represents nothing short of an existential crisis. The league needs viewers, desperately, urgently. And Angel Reese, regardless of her current on-court abilities or competitive contribution, brings attention. She brings controversy. She brings social media engagement and debate and the kind of polarizing presence that drives clicks and arguments and hot takes and, theoretically at least, viewership numbers that justify continued investment. Which brings us to the most explosive allegation now circulating through basketball circles and being debated in group chats and comment sections across the sports world. Did TNT Sports, the league's broadcast partner with significant financial stakes in the product's success, put pressure on star players and league decision-makers to facilitate Angel Reese's return specifically for ratings purposes? Did Nafisa Collier, Brianna Stewart, and other prominent players who serve as unofficial league ambassadors face behind-the-scenes pressure to support or enable this move because the broadcast partner needed content that would generate attention and reverse catastrophic viewership trends? If media companies are now dictating roster decisions, if television contracts are determining who plays and who doesn't based on celebrity rather than merit, if business considerations are overriding competitive integrity, then the entire league has been fundamentally compromised, and what we are watching is no longer authentic professional sports. This is not about whether Angel Reese deserves to play basketball at some level. This is not about whether she has talent or potential or past accomplishments that merit recognition. This is about process and fairness and equal application of rules, about whether the standards apply equally to everyone or whether certain individuals receive special accommodations because of their media profile and ability to generate attention. There are dozens of players across this league who would perform adequately or better in limited minutes down the stretch of a lost season. Players who have been practicing daily, staying ready mentally and physically, waiting patiently for their opportunity. Players who followed every protocol, met every requirement, satisfied every condition, and still sit on benches watching while someone with more Instagram followers and Twitter mentions gets activated for the final 2 games of a meaningless season. The basketball community has noticed, and the silence from league officials only amplifies suspicions. The questions are not coming from fringe voices or casual haters looking to tear down successful women. They are coming from respected analysts, former champions, people who have dedicated their entire lives to this sport, and who recognize when something does not add up and when explanations do not match observable reality. The lack of transparency around the return only fuels the suspicion and invites speculation. What were the medical clearances and who signed off on them? What were the roster procedures followed, and were they standard or modified? What exemptions were filed, under what justification, and who approved them? In professional sports, these processes are typically documented extensively, explained publicly, and made part of the public record, specifically to maintain competitive integrity and prevent exactly the kind of suspicion and conspiracy theories now surrounding this situation. And make no mistake, the on-court performance did absolutely nothing to quiet the controversy or provide basketball justification. If Angel Reese had returned and dominated completely, if she had locked down opposing players and showcased elite defensive instincts, if she had demonstrated the defensive brilliance that earned her the award in the first place, then perhaps the basketball justification could override the procedural concerns and silence critics. But getting absolutely cooked by Kelsey Mitchell on the game's deciding possession does the opposite. It reinforces the narrative that this return was not about winning basketball games or giving the Rose their best competitive chance. It was about something else entirely, something disconnected from athletic merit and competitive excellence. Kelsey Mitchell, for her part, continues to be one of the most underappreciated and overlooked stars in professional basketball, despite consistently elite production. 27 points in 19 minutes is an absurd scoring rate that would dominate headlines and drive award conversations if it happened in a league that people actually watched in significant numbers. Her game winner was not lucky or fortunate. It was not a broken play that accidentally worked out. It was pure skill execution against a defender who had no answer, no counter, no ability to stay in front of someone operating at an elite offensive level with complete confidence. Mitchell has been delivering performances like this throughout her entire career with relatively little fanfare or mainstream recognition, while players with bigger social media followings receive disproportionate attention regardless of actual production or competitive impact. The contrast is stark and uncomfortable to acknowledge. One player delivering elite basketball performances night after night to empty arenas and minimal media coverage. Another player generating massive attention and controversy, despite performances that range from adequate to defensive liability, depending on the moment and matchup. This imbalance is not new in professional sports, where marketability and performance do not always align perfectly. But it becomes deeply problematic when it appears that marketability is actively overriding performance in personnel decisions that affect competitive outcomes and determine which athletes get opportunities. Looking ahead, Angel Reese has 2 more games, 2 more opportunities to either validate this return with dominant performances or further expose the gap between reputation and current reality. The Rose Basketball Club will not make the playoffs. That outcome is virtually mathematically certain, regardless of what happens in these final contests. So the basketball stakes are minimal to non-existent. But the broader stakes, the questions about integrity and process, and whether this league operates as a legitimate competitive entity or as a content generation vehicle for struggling broadcast partners, those stakes could not be higher for the future of professional women's basketball. The answers to these questions will shape how seriously basketball fans take this league moving forward and whether the product on the court is viewed as authentic competition or manufactured drama designed primarily to boost engagement metrics and salvage television contracts. The Angel Reese return was supposed to be a positive story that generated goodwill, but instead it has become a flashpoint for every concern about how this league operates and who it truly serves.